Welcome to Conexec, a global leadership platform for construction executives. This podcast is delivered weekly, featuring a construction executive each week. This week, we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of interviewing a construction executives, we're going to go through some of the ways that we can deal with the current situation we're in related to the coronavirus. So I refer to this as the Connex coronavirus episode. So we're going to be focusing on some items taken out of the concept of EOS. If you don't know what EOS is Entrepreneur Operating System, and it's just a process of trying to simplify the complex. So that's what we're going to kind of do today, and I kind of want to walk through it and use this as kind of a survival guide of how we deal with the current situation that we're in and how do we keep our wits about us. So um, so to begin this, we want to talk about uh, what are we going to do? What how do we deal with the current situation relative? The fact is, many people are angry about this situation. They're angry about their loss of work. They're angry about the fact people are getting sick. They're angry about how the government's dealing with it. They're angry about a lot of different things, and we have to deal with that. So the initial reactions of most people is obviously going to be disbelief, anger, frustration, um, and then the last but not least, panic. And it's important to keep logic as a perspective in this entire thing, because in this window of fear, we can feel that we are completely overwhelmed. So it's important to take that step back a little bit and think about it in broader terms. Um, it's important that you check in with your people as a construction executive. It's important you check in with your people on a more frequent basis. Depending on the size of your organization, depends on how you do this. I personally, what I have done is I personally reached out to every individual in my company, talked one on one, about the situation and what we're doing to get by it. Now, that may not be feasible if if you're Larry Blackburn and you have hundreds or thousands of people, or, Stephen Gray, where you have thousands of people around the world. But, if you're David Dean and you have 50, 60 people, that may very well be possible. So that's one way. You want to make it personal in nature. The common question I get during these conversations is what I think about the situation. And I simply state that I'm a realist. The fact is, there is a situation, no doubt. But if we take it week by week and work through this and deal with issues as we, go week by week, we're going to be fine on the other side of this. We're not only going to be able to survive, we're going to be able to thrive, and that's the message I try to instill in people and try to push out. In these times, it's important that you be calm, you avoid the panic, you be a realist, you take the necessary actions that need to be taken. You over communicate what you're doing so that nobody, is misunderstanding what the situation is at any point in time. Um, so this is not about who's responsible for it in our eyes. Okay, we're facing something that we knew existed, but we didn't know it could actually happen. Commonly referred to as the black swan. If you've ever read the book Never Split the Difference, a black swan is just an event that completely shakes our life, or it's unexpected at the time. However, in reality, it's not unexpected. It very well could be a reality. And in the book, he just discusses how the first person who became suicide by cop was a guy who robbed a bank back in the early 1980s, and his actions showed he wanted to be murdered by the cops, or I should say, killed by the cops. Um, his actions indicated that, but the our mindset was that we needed to negotiate with this guy. Well, this guy didn't want to negotiate. This guy wanted to be killed. I mean, it was simple as that. So, in a similar situation, we knew that this was always a possibility. There's plans in place. There's, the World Health Organization has discussed it. But when it actually hit us, I think that we're kind of caught off guard in the fact that we didn't realize it could happen so quickly. So the fact is that our lives have been disrupted. It has shaken our confidence in our families, our employees, our community, and our businesses. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here, and how do we overcome that. Economically speaking, we have been here before. I mean, that's a fact. There is no difference between where we were in 2007, 2008, 2009, and today. Economically, we've suffered a setback, and or if you can look at it a different way, a setup for a future explosion of growth. So this may seem unprecedented, but in reality, it's nothing new. Strictly from an economic perspective, the possibility of recession is real. If we're not in it right now, then the fact is that we may realize that later. Um, but now is the time for us to put together some type of plan of what we're going to do and how we're going to deal with it. Okay. Um, so if you go back to the last recession, what referred to as the Great Recession back in 2007 through 2009, you'll realize that most people delayed the critical actions that need to take place. Right? There's a lot of people who were optimists, and if you've never have seen a little short video on the Stockdale paradox um, that the author Jim Collins describes in the book Good to Great, you need to look at that. In fact, I'll probably attach it to this podcast. And he just talks about don't be an optimist, but just be a realist, right? We know we're going to get through this. That's a fact. We know our business is going to get through this. How we get through it and how long it's going to be is the question. And so it's something we have to deal with. There's two things in that video that in his book that I took from it, and it was to have faith that we will endure the hardships and prevail in the end. You have to really believe that. And secondly, and hold to the faith without wavering while still confronting the brutal realities of the current situation. So we have to be realistic of what's occurring out there and the consequences we have to us and our companies, but have a unwavering focus or unwavering faith that we're going to get through this hardship. It's just a matter of how long and and how we're going to do it. So we don't want to, just be in a state of denial. We want to move forward. So, kind of with that said, let's talk about how do we move forward. What are some of the planning strategies we can take in general to kind of get through this? The first one, I think, and this was actually given as a survival checklist by one of my colleagues. That's part of a CEO group with me, and they shared this with me about how do we get through this current situation? What are some things that we need to do in order to get through it? So the first thing and the most important thing is to stay focused and completely disciplined. Um, we need to exercise discipline in what we do every day, and we need to focus on what we're doing. And what I told all my folks in uh, in our meeting, and I remind them periodically. Actually, I did a video for them. And I just told them, this is what you need to do. You need to go and do your job. You need to do your job with discipline and focus every single day. As long as you're doing your job, everything else is going to work out. Similar to a football team, everybody has a position, everybody has a responsibility. If someone misses their blocking assignment, then that's going to affect something else, right? Or it's going to affect our trajectory moving forward. So that's what, staying focused is probably the most important thing. We can get caught up in everything that's happening around our world, but the fact is we need to stay focused and we need to be disciplined. And you know what that means for your organization. Just communicate, go do your job. Do your job and do your job well. Especially since we're working at home, we're working at a distance. It's important to stay focused and disciplined. Number two, make a contingency plan for possible scenarios, and I'm not talking about every scenario out there. I mean, there are going to be a lot of things that could happen, but the most likely situations, and that includes looking at cash flow, cash planning, what you do with the money you do have, because there's going to be a liquidity issue here in the future. People are going to start holding on to their money, and when they start doing that, you have to have a plan in place to deal with that. So it's important to have contingencies in place. If this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And like I said before, don't think about everything that could possibly go wrong. Think about the most likely things that can happen. I always say realm of, there's two circles. There's a realm of control and a realm of concern. Anything outside the bubble of the realm of control, I mean, a realm of control can't be outside the bubble of the realm of concern. So if we can't affect it, we can't be concerned by it. That doesn't mean we don't think about it, but we can't affect it. In this situation, we cannot affect the fact that there's a virus out there that has shut down most of our economy. What we can do is we can deal with the tangible uh, task and issues that we have control over rather than focusing on that bigger issue. So make contingencies and plan for cash liquidity issues. Number three, mentally prepare to be a leader in your company. We need to make sure that if somebody steps out because of sickness or because of an issue, that we have somebody in their place to pick up and move on, and we have a process in place. If you are the type of company that has a lot, or is a smaller company, or the type of company where people don't kind of share information, this is going to be tough for you. So you need to make sure to cross train and have processes in place that if someone were to get sick or have to step out for one situation or the other, we have a way to make sure that the movie goes on. That we continue to stay on track and the mission continues to go on regardless of who is part of the mission. So make sure we're doing that. Number four, decide now in advance how much you can do to help your employees through the crisis. And this is a tough one here. Okay, so what do you do? What's your sick leave policy? Uh, is there any extensions you're going to get? What's the vacation policy? Um, what can you afford to do? Do you have to change things? Do you have to temporarily suspend things like 401ks? There's a lot of different things that you have to consider. We want to be generous, we want to be kind, but we don't want to leave it open ended. We want to understand that the survival of the business is more important than any one individual. And I say that not to be mean, but once again, I always go back. But the reality is, without a business, people don't have the job. We have this 80-20 theory in America now that if 80% of the people who will get the virus won't really be affected, and the 20% will be either majorly or moderately affected. Well, we have to take care of the 80% because if we don't take care of the 80%, then the 20% won't be taken care of. So that 80%, is the vast majority of our employees. How are we going to deal with them? How are we going to make it to where they're going to stay around? How do we retain them? How do we make it to where they're focused on their work rather than if they're going to have a job tomorrow? So we need to make sure that we have something in place. How are we going to deal with this crisis in advance rather than just being reactive to the situation? We want to make sure that we have an alternate accountability chart based on contingencies, people stepping out, having different issues, people getting sick. We need to have an accountability chart for those situations. Um, the next one is to prepare a weekly cash flow forecast. Now most companies do this, or at least I hope most companies do this. But we need to plan a little further out than just um, guidance says 12 to 13 weeks need to be our cash flow forecasting during this period of time. Why is that important? It's important, like I had mentioned before. Cash liquidity is going to be a major concern in the future. And I'll just use my business as a model here. We're maintaining our business, adding a little bit here or there, so we haven't been majorly affected. But after this project has, after this period of time has gone by and the virus is kind of in our rear view mirror, we have about 20, 30 people that are about ready to start projects, and projects are going to start up. There's going to be a lot of pent up need there. And that need and that necessitates a a amount of cash to pay for it. So when we go from 60 to 80, 90 people, I mean there is a cash crunch that's going to occur, and you need to be prepared for that. Also, along with that, keep in mind that we have to be aware of what we pay and how we pay it. I'm always a big believer in paying your bills on time. Um, but in these times, companies like banks or lending institutions will make some concessions to help businesses out. And we have to kind of seek those out and kind of consider who we pay and the frequency we pay them. What can we negotiate? Those type of items. But we need to know what our cash flow is going to be on a week by week basis for an extended period of time, like a 90-day period. We want to manage the accounts payable, and this, once again, this sounds terrible, but it's when I say manage accounts payable, this is who we're paying. Um, we have the must pays. We have strategic partners that we can negotiate with, like I refer to as a bank, and then we have everybody else. We have to, as everybody else tightens their belt a little bit and pays a little slower, and those type of things happen, we have to be aware of that. I mean, there are some things that we must pay. Here's a good one: payroll tax. Well, we may be given a little holiday on that with the government right now, but the fact is, if you don't pay the government, um, you don't pay your employees their wages, you're not going to be able to move forward. So those are must pays. Strategic partners, these are people like, say banks or whatever that we can negotiate with and figure out alternate payment terms. And then we have everybody else. These are people, maybe suppliers or whatever, that we could, work a deal out to where we can, maybe one-time deals with a certain supplier or something that we can work out. I'm not really a big advocate of people we don't have a relationship with extending the amount of time that we hold on to their money. But the reality is, you have to be aware that you have people you must pay, and then you have to have strategic partners. That's a fact. We want to watch our accounts receivable with new diligence, not only just having forecasts, but we need to watch it. Any savvy customer is going to classify their receivables in the categories we just listed: must pays, strategic partners, and everybody else. I would hope that people just pay their bills and don't overextend themselves. But in these times, people are going to overextend themselves. That is reality. So we have to watch our accounts receivable, and if we see an issue occurring, we immediately address that issue. And last but not least, we want to watch our scorecards. What I mean by that is we want to look at our metrics on a regular basis. If you're not looking and you're not looking at your financials weekly and you're not saying, okay, this is what my overhead costs are and this is how much revenue I'm bringing in, if you're not looking at that and you can't assess that, then you need to relook at that situation. And the reason I say that is you could be losing money and not even be aware of it. You have to be aware that of what revenue you're generating and how that relates to the cost you're putting out. So you need to know on a week by week basis, not just a project by project basis. We want to know sure week by week. And if we are losing money, then we can take an action to mitigate that. That's it should be a no-brainer there, but a lot of people don't monitor it, and that's why people go out of business is they don't monitor that. They're not aware of what their costs are. What our costs are. Related to the revenue they're bringing in. So, okay, so we kind of through that a little bit. I do want to share a couple other things with you. First is there is a something out there called a pandemic planning checklist, and it kind of goes through some items here. Let me see how many. It's only 2 pages long. It's 6 items, and it goes for the 6 items are real clear. Clear. Plan for an impact uh, on your business. Plan for the impact it has on your employees. Establish the policies to be implemented. Allocate resources to protect the employees and the customers. Communicate and educate employees, and then coordinate with external organizations and help in your community. So this is just key items that we need to consider as we go about uh, our work every day. The first of all, a plan for the impact on your business. Have somebody who's responsible as a coordinator, um, who can help develop a planned response. That may be a collateral duty. It's got to be someone who has a lot of authority with your organization. Um, we want to identify essential employees and critical inputs that we have to have. We need to train and prepare ancillary workforces like contractors and other people we can bring in. We want to develop and plan for scenarios likely to result in an increase or decrease in demand. So how are we going to deal with increase or decrease in demand? We're going to determine what the potential impact to the business financials there are going to be. We're going to look at the potential impact to domestic international travel, and in this case, we know that it's tremendously, especially internationally. I mean, it's just not happening right now. Domestically, that could be put into a major, be a major concern in the very near future. I mean, look what's happening in New York right now. Find up to date, reliable information to monitor. Establish an emergency communication plan and how we communicate that and how we put it out, and make sure that it's all inclusive. Here's a great idea here. How about having mass texts that you can put out for information on a regular basis? And then we want to implement any exercise or drills that we want to test the plan periodically. So that's how we plan for our business. Now let's plan for our employees and customers. Forecast and allow for employees' absence during a pandemic. So if somebody is going to be sick, how are we going to deal with that? We implement guidelines to modify the frequency and the type of face-to-face contact if we're going to have it. We want to encourage and track vaccinations, for different types of vaccinations, different type of drugs people are using, and that's tough because you kind of run up against HIPAA laws there about what kind of information you want to gather. But during times where people can be contagious, we as employers have the right to know if someone has the coronavirus and be able to transmit it to somebody else. Evaluate employee access to and availability to healthcare services. We want to evaluate employees' access availability of mental health services because during these times it's not just the physical. People are dealing with a lot of mental issues. How they're going to pay their bills, how they're going to deal with these issues. We got to be able to get our arms around that. We want to identify employees and key customers with special needs, so we can help meet those needs. During these times, it is the times you're going to make customers for life. And I say that because it's not during the easy times you find customers. It's during those tough times where you have to do something that's difficult, and this is an optimum opportunity. So let's talk about establishing policies that we need to implement. Um, we want to have a policy for compensation, sick leave, those type of things we talked about before. We want to establish policies for flexible work environment and work hours. We want to establish policies preventing the spread of any kind of anything within the workspace. How are we going to deal with that? Establish these policies for employees who expose themselves. Establish policy for restricting travel to affected geographical areas. Like, we don't want people probably flying in and out of New York right now. There's such a big, so many, that's 50% of all the cases currently. We want to set up the authorities, triggers, and procedures for activating and terminating the company's response plan. What do we do? When do we have to modify, our plan? Moving on to the next section, allocating resources to protect employees and customers, provide efficient and accessible infection control supplies, hand sanitizers, all those type of things. We're working with organizations now that we actually are providing people that have a skill set to deal with this virus, and they're on the job site, you know, providing guidance, supplies, and determining if there is an issue on the job. We want to enhance communication, and information technology makes that very easy today. We want to ensure availability of medical consultation or advice on emergency response. So the next section we're going to go through is communicate to and educate your employees. So we need to develop and disseminate programs and materials covering the fundamentals of the pandemic we're dealing with. We want to anticipate, and there's plenty of those resources out there currently. You just search on the internet. We want to anticipate employees' fears and anxieties, rumors, and misinformation. If we do not clearly communicate, you know what's going to occur? They're going to automatically come up with a story, and communicate that to others if we fail to communicate. So it's important to get out in front of that and put out information. Um, we want to make sure the communications are cultural and linguistically appropriate. Um, so how we talk to people, how we communicate is important. Disseminate information to employees about pandemic preparedness and response. Provide information for at-home care of ill employees or family members, and develop platforms for communicating any kind of status of the pandemic, and what we're doing about it. We want to identify any community sources for timely and accurate pandemic information. There's a lot of information out there. We need to figure out what's the most reliable information that we need to gather and utilize that information. And it may not be just one; it may be multiple different, um, you know, sources that we use. The last section of this pandemic checklist is coordinate with external organizations. Collaborate with insurers, healthcare plans, local healthcare facilities, and understand their capabilities. Collaborate with federal, state, and local public health agencies of how we deal with something. Have somebody in your organization communicate. If we have somebody gets coronavirus, how do we deal with that? You want to communicate with local and state public health agencies on emergency responders about the assets and services your business could contribute to the community. We have, especially in construction, capabilities that we can help others with. It's important in these times that we don't just focus on ourselves and our business, we focus on others also. And we want to be able to share best practices with our community about how we dealt with the situation. I have been able to get a lot of great information by having peer groups and meeting and talking about how are we handling this issue. One of the ideas that somebody had for me recently was because we have a whole bunch of restaurants having difficulties right now, why don't we have everybody in the company submit a restaurant that we want to support, uh, and then the company each week, and then the company go out and buy food for everybody in the company from that restaurant. And I thought that was a great idea. That's engaging people in a solution. Um, and I think that's good in a lot of ways. It shows that you care. It also, you know, changes, people's mindset. A lot of great things from that. People want to have action, and that's a way that we can kind of deal with that. Uh, so, kind of to sum this all up, I just want to say more importantly than anything is that we want to be the person who is a realist, but also keeps everything in perspective. People during these times look for leadership, and you can tell real leaders from people who are just I used to always say leaders during peacetime, because in the military, wartime is where you really see people's leadership abilities. Um, but during this time of war, which we're at right now, the real leaders are going to kind of come out, and as if you're a senior manager in an organization, it's time for you to flex your leadership skills, communicate to people, get in front of them, reassure them, be realistic with them. They're looking to you for answers. It's important you give those answers. If you fail to give those answers, you know what they're going to do? They're going to come up with their own answer, and their own answer may be not accurate. So, very important you get out in front of this. If you're a leader and you're not an outgoing, extroverted type of people, and you find it difficult to communicate with people, just because it's not part of your personality, then you need to have somebody step in and be that person. It is imperative during this time that we over communicate. This is the situation, this is where we're going, and this is our status. If you don't do that, you're going to lose people. You're going to create unnecessary anxiety among people. And I've seen this during the military when you go into places, or referred to as hot zones, areas where you could potentially have enemy contact. If you are not out in front of this and you're not communicating what the issue is, and you're not showing leadership, like, hey, you're willing to do what it takes to accomplish your mission. If you don't do that, then there's a lack of trust. Um, there's a lack of willingness to try, and it is so important during these times we practice things like leadership by example, leadership through communication. I mean, there's numerous different things that we have learned, and I can't say it enough, but communication is probably one of the most important things we can use during this time. Failure to communicate is a failure in business. And once again, if you are not the type to communicate on a regular basis, or you just don't enjoy communicating, or you're not an approachable person, you need to go find somebody in your company that is that, and communicate that, get them to communicate your message, because during these times, that's what people need that reassuring voice. People need that uh, a reality check of where we're at, because if you sat at home and you turn the television on to a news station, you're going to hear a lot of bad things all day long. Some may be realistic, some may not be. Some may affect a specific region, some may not. Some may affect a specific business entity, and it may not even be yours. But if you don't do that, then once again, people will develop their own theories about what is actually occurring. So this has been my, the Connex version, the dealing with the coronavirus. I hope it was of some help to you. A little bit of a different format. I got this information from multiple different sources. A lot of great information contained in this podcast about how to deal with it, on a day by day basis. If you want to consult with me and ask me some questions or have me come in and communicate for you, I'm willing and able to do that. People say, well, why would I have you come to my organization to communicate for me? Well, how you say things is as important as what you say. So if you don't have somebody within an organization that can do that, you maybe need to get somebody like myself or somebody else. But we are a resource for you, and I I look forward to helping any of you out there that need my help. You can go to my website, aceconsulting.net, and you have my contact information is there, and we can and you can feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. It's important not to fall into the panic and the hysteria here. This is not a good situation, but it's not the end of the world, right? I'm a Christian. I'm a big believer in God, and I personally think that God has a plan. He's working behind the scenes. We just need to take it week in and week out. Take it week by week. When I ran marathons in the past, I would say take that next step in front of you. And sometimes it helps just looking down at the road surface in front of you rather than looking a mile ahead of you, because sometimes it's that next step is going to get you where you need to be. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with just one step, right? And that's where we're at right now. This is maybe a long, difficult road, but we have to do it step by step, and step by step means week by week. And look at that from a business perspective. Once again, you need anything, feel free. I'm going to be back, pushing out podcasts. A little bit difficult with people being busy right now to get some podcasts out, so I may do some things that are different, like I did today. I went through, some of the items to how are you going to, get through this coronavirus situation and during this period of difficult times, and I hope it was of help to you. If it was, share it with somebody else. And I know it's always nice for people to have resources to go to and plans of action. If anything, I hope that this podcast gave you a little insight into some of the things that you can do in your organization to help. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week, and like I said, if you need anything, feel free to reach out to me.